Lecture 11, Presentation 4. The three oldest human fossil-bearing localities hold archaic Homo sapiens. So you're looking at a map plan of the Atapuercan localities, and the three oldest include Cima del Elefante, dated at 1 million years ago, followed by Grandolina at 800,000 years ago, and Cima de los Huesos, dated to 430,000 years ago. Let's begin with the oldest locality at Atapuerca, Cima del Elefante, 1 million years in age. When I saw this article in the paper in March 2008, I did not appreciate its importance. I was distracted by the ad some youngster had placed next to the fossil for dental implants. And if you look at the fossil, you can see it could have used some. Then I was confused by the title. Jaw-dropping find ages people more. What does that mean? If you drop your jaw, you get older faster? Well, let's take a look at this. Then I read the scientific article. In Nature, the first Europeans, the jaw that puts humans in Spain 1 million plus years ago. And that led to my understanding that the find was extremely important. Cima del Elefante has been chronometrically dated using multiple methods, including paleomagnetism. The fossil jaw was recovered from level TE9, dating to about 1 million years ago. Along with the jaw, there were simple Oldowan stone tools and faunal animal remains with stone tool cut marks. So if you look right along here, you'll see stone tool cut marks here using a scanning electron microscope. This is a micrograph. And then up here, you can see more of these. The Atapuercan researchers placed the fossils into a species they had previously assigned to fossils at the slightly younger Grandolina locality, Homo antecessor. Just FYI, this translates to frontier man. Others identified both sets of fossils as Homo heidelbergensis. Now we can identify the fossils as archaic Homo sapiens, the oldest human in Europe. Now let's move on to the slightly younger locality at Atapuerca, Grandolina, dating to 800,000 years in age. 7 of Grandolina's 11 stratigraphic levels are rich in fossils. Level TD6 holds the oldest Grandolina human fossils, dating to about 800,000 years in age. The archaic Homo sapiens fossils were recovered in association with over 200 Oldowan stone tools and over 600 non-human mammal bones. The best fossil find is a skull belonging to an individual known as Grandolina Boy. Over on the left, you can see local artists' depictions of this boy. Note the discontinuous brow supporting placement in archaic Homo sapiens. Grandolina Boy was a teenager, about 14 to 16 years old at the time of his death, and he had company. Over 95 human bones from a minimum of at least 8 individuals have been recovered at the site. The biological ages of the individuals ranged from 3 years old to 18 years old. What happened to these youngsters? Well, it turns out that they were processed by humans for the purpose of dietary cannibalism. Our evidence, 25% of the juvenile human bones evidence human-induced damage. So over on the right, you can see an SEM micrograph of cut marks on the clavicle where big muscle had been removed from the neck region. Cut marks are also found where muscles had been removed from the forelimb bones. We've got the radius over on the left, and also from metacarpal bone, so the palm bone on the hand, and from the zygomatic cheek arch connecting down to through a muscle to the temporal region. There are also percussion marks where the bone had been cracked open to extract nutrient-rich marrow. There is no doubt that the Grandolina juveniles had been cannibalized for dietary purposes. Archaic Homo sapiens was probably not the first human species to engage in cannibalism, but older data are not conclusive. For example, good old Peking man, Homo erectus, was thought to have been cannibalized, but recent research indicates carnivore, not human, processing. And here is a reconstruction of a giant hyena attacking Peking man. Both humans and non-humans, so the animals that were consumed as food at Grandolina, had been processed in identical ways by humans. Both had been defleshed in the same way for the same purpose, dietary or nutritional need. There is no evidence of ritualistic cannibalism, defleshing and consumption of an ancestor or enemy for purposes of worship, not dietary or nutritional need. Also, none of the individuals show evidence of homicide. Nobody got bonked on the head, for example. Nutritional cannibalism results from starvation. Those who are processed usually die of natural causes. They usually die of starvation. This fact may explain why the Grandolina victims were so young. One of the primary causes of childhood mortality today is malnutrition. The high number of juveniles at Grandolina supports cannibalism due to nutritional stress. And finally, let's examine the youngest of the ancient fossil localities at Atapuerca, Cima de los Huesos, 430,000 years in age. Huesos means bones, so this is the pit of bones. Dated at 430,000 years in age, it predates Neanderthal proper by 130,000 years. The fossil locality is at the bottom of a 42.5 foot deep vertical shaft. The original entrance to the pit opening was at the end of a long, unlit passageway. Cima de los Huesos is one of the most difficult localities to work in. There is low oxygen, it is cold all year long, which is unusual for caves. Most caves are they're pretty moderate in temperature and don't swing back and forth. And the area is cramped atop a compacted collection of humans and non-human fossils, as I will show you in the next slide. Here you can see workers on planks sitting above areas where fossils are found, and then once they get an area cleared, they can work downward into it. More than 7,000 hominin fossils are known from the site. The fossil bones and teeth represent a minimum of 28 individuals. In the oval picture here, you can see the top of a skull, you can see a lower jaw with 3 teeth on it, and a whole bunch of long bones, all mixed together and compacted down. The most recognizable specimen is the skull and jaw of an individual known as Cima 5. Often, as in this image, it is shown with postcranial elements, but there is no evidence that the bones belong to that particular individual. There were multiple individuals in the mix. Cima 5 has been identified, as shown in the illustration, as an adult male with an abscessed tooth. That's why his face is all swollen on one side. If you look right over here, you'll see that the bone is very porous. That's because there was an infection in that area, and the infection drained out and left that porosity. Also, you'll notice that the alveolar process, the tooth sockets, are all missing in that area. That's from infection and decay. A single artifact was recovered among the fossils, a gorgeous red quartzite Acheulean hand axe. It's beautiful. So what do we know about the humans in the pit? And you can see an artist's depiction of all these individuals. Unlike Grandolina, 80% of the individuals are prime age reproductive teens and adults. Individuals younger than 11 years old are nearly absent. One thing to remember, in prehistoric times, reproduction began in the early teen years. So many SEMA individuals were in their prime reproductive years that it suggests some terrible event, but there are no signs of violence, no signs of human-induced bone damage. And there is one other odd thing. There are high numbers of carnivores, but no evidence of their typical prey. The carnivores include 167 cave bears, 26 foxes, several wolves, and a couple lions, and these are cave lions. In a review of taphonomic studies on the Cima de los Huesos specimens, David Rabada and others argue that most of the humans in the fossil sample were part of a carnivore cache, a hiding place, probably due to cats. Let's examine this possibility. Cats hunt herbivores in the fields where the prey live. They tend to eat the organs of their prey and cache the meatier parts up in the crotch of a tree for safekeeping. Most herbivores stay away from areas where cats have dens in the hills. However, if the carnivores find prey near their dens, they cache the remains in a cave close to home. They don't ever put the remains in their own caves where they might have kittens. Humans would have used caves for shelter and would have been vulnerable to cave-using predators. Some hypothesize that archaic Homo sapiens was cached by cave lions at Cima de los Huesos. The Cima human bones have about 450 carnivore bite marks. Larger marks are associated with cave lions, and smaller marks are due to canids, foxes, and wolves that probably snuck into the cave to steal free meals from the cave lion cache. This explains one sour relationship today. You've got it. Cats rule and dogs drool. European cave lions were large but as nimble as all cats. They could have used very narrow entrances into the cave, which are now obscured by fallen rock. This is one of the items that needs to be checked out in the cave. Is there another opening? Due to their large size, cave bears could not have entered or exited the cave through small openings used by cats and small canids. They may have wandered into the cave searching for shelter or food and fallen down the vertical shaft. They could not have crawled out. What about the presence of the single Acheulean hand axe? Well, the taphonomists conclude that the collection was a result of carnivore activity, but it was also supplemented by human error, as the next image will show. The occasional accident would have added to the skeletal collection. For example, an individual archaic human carrying an Acheulean hand axe may have entered the cave, wandered down the long, unlit cave hallway, and, like the cave bears, took one step too many, falling down the 43.5-foot vertical shaft. The principal investigators at Atapuerca have an alternative hypothesis. They have suggested that the human bodies were thrown down the shaft in order to dispose of the remains and avoid attracting predators. Well, why would they have done this? Humans did not live in the cave. They modified the hypothesis to support intentional burial as part of ritual behavior. The single Acheulean hand axe, thus, is interpreted by those authors as the first known burial good, and we'll be talking more about burial goods next lecture. A burial good is an item of symbolic meaning placed with the individual at death. I'm not sure that I buy this hypothesis. It's pretty speculative and it's very fanciful. In summary, the Atapuercan and archaic Homo sapiens data. 1. Explain the presence of European Acheulean hand axes even though Homo erectus was absent in Europe proper. 2. Provides a plausible explanation for the origin of Neanderthal Homo sapiens in Europe 300,000 years ago. And 3. Supports an older age for the very first archaic Homo sapiens. The species diverged from Homo erectus in Africa before expansion into Europe. It must be older than 1 million years in age. Bottom line, the estimated ages of the known African archaic Homo sapien fossils may be wrong, highly likely, or else the oldest African Homo sapiens fossils have not been recovered, equally highly likely. This sounds like a very promising line of investigation for future paleoanthropologists if any of you should choose to pursue this. Now you are ready for Lecture 11, Presentation 5, our final presentation.